So for some of you, before actually, I'm not going to give you the topic for those of you who don't know the topic yet, because I want you to think out of the box. But first, let's go around and say our names, because not all of us know each other. So I'm Rabbi Vaisberg. My first name is Dave, not Rabbi. I've made that joke a bunch of times, I guess. But there are always new people to hear the old jokes. So.
I'm Carol Sue.
I'm Denise.
Brian.
Elizabeth.
Marcy.
I'm John.
Fantastic. And so Marcy and John, I've let people know before, this is not a course saying you should be Jewish. This is, I don't know your backgrounds, but it's by no means meant to, what's the word, where you go door to door and proselytize. It's merely informative. What to expect when you go to some kind of Jewish environment, or when you go to a certain festival. Hello! I don't know, but so with that, also I apologize. I'm gonna have to be 5 minutes early at 7:15 because I have a Shiva call to make. Shiva, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, is part of the mourning process. So I'm going to the services about somebody's home whose brother died this past week. So I'm going to pass around a couple of cards. You only need one. And I'm going to pass around pens as well. Thank you. You don't need to write your name on the card. But ideally, I would like you to share what you write on the card after you've written it.
Done.
It's a twisted. And the color of the card is arbitrary. There's no significance in the hot pink, or the salmon. The salmon color, they tell us. Okay. So, thank you. I would like you to write one of the first times you were responsible for something in a significant way. Like significant responsibility. You had it for the first time. Or one of the first significant times.
That's interesting.
Oh, you don't need. Oh, yeah, thank you. And if you could give me a nod when you're done, that would be helpful. Or I'll see that you put it in. Denise, is yours funny based on the look?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Nothing particular. I mean, there's always a funny story.
Of course. Y'all good? Oh. So you can pick one when you hear the next question. The next question, I wasn't sure if they were 3 questions or 1, so I give you the option to answer them however you will. How did you get such responsibility? Why did you get such responsibility? And why did somebody trust you with this responsibility? So really, how, why, and then I guess the who was involved and why was that who involved? And for those of you watching on YouTube, if you haven't figured out, you should fast forward through this section. Maybe somebody will edit in a big red stop sign into the fast forward sequence.
I mean, you just right now what you're responsible for?
How you got the responsibility and why somebody trusted you with it. Tough question. Have you figured out why I'm asking these questions? The what?
I don't know what it was.
The vixen?
So have you figured out why?
I read.
You see the link?
Yes.
Okay, good. No, you don't get to share it. It's a surprise if you didn't read ahead. Okay. Are you all ready for the next one? This is the last question. How did you mark this moment of receiving responsibility? And with whom did you mark it, if at all?
This is going to turn out to be very funny.
I'm looking forward to it.
What's the first part of the question again?
How did you mark this moment?
Mark it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you toast it with champagne?
Oh.
Did you do nothing?
Okay.
Did you do a jog around the block waving a flag of victory?
I don't think we did anything.
And now I've got Les Mis in my head with waving flags. Do you hear the people sing? Singing the
sang
songs of Jewish
I
men.
sang that in front of 3,000 people with a choir on board a ship.
Next year we should do a Purim spiel to the tunes
I
of
would love
Les
to do that.
The kids would like that.
Mis.
Fun.
Not this year, it's too late. But okay, are you all ready? Who would like to share first? You don't all have to share, but if you'd like to.
I'll do it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And John, you have to share because you said yours would be funny.
Oh.
I like a good laugh.
Okay, the first was when I had to set up my own kosher home.
Ah.
That was my
Set up a kosher home. There are a lot of Jewish dietary laws. We spoke about them earlier in the year, and it's a lot of work. It involves the kinds of foods you bring into your home. It involves the dishes. It involves separation of the dishes. So it is a big ordeal. But it's not only about personal ritual. It's about who can eat in your home. Because if you keep kosher, strictly kosher, you can only eat in a kosher kitchen. So there's a lot that you have to do and a lot of repercussions. Or potential repercussions.
What was the next question?
Okay, so how did you get such responsibility? Why? Why did somebody trust you?
Okay, I got married to my Jewish husband, and I wanted to maintain my tradition. And the who was myself.
Nice.
The way I was brought up.
So you trusted yourself. Your husband trusted you to do it.
Well, yeah, we were both from our backgrounds, so we knew pretty much what we were going to do. And how do we mark that event? By putting up a mezuzah on our door.
So you showed that. So you used another ritual. You used a ritual to mark that you were doing something
That was
sacred.
the first, yeah, that was the first thing we did. Was to set up.
Amazing.
Not really.
I think it's wonderful.
Okay.
John, do you want to share? It's okay to have something totally different.
Oh, he's the rabbi.
We're supposed to write down something responsible.
Yes.
So I wrote down me. Like I have to be responsible for me. It's kind of
It's good.
Half the people here are not Jewish.
How did you get such responsibility? Why did you trust yourself with such
How did I get it?
responsibility?
I was bored.
I thought it was a good story.
Absolutely.
You have to.
No, exactly. So that's what that.
You just pop out.
Hopefully.
No one trusts you with that. I mean, you have to be responsible for you. That's one of the things there. It's one of the obvious things there.
So my question then on that is, at what point did you figure out that you had to be responsible for yourself?
I guess as you get older, maybe. I mean, when you're younger, you really don't have a.
Do you have any idea of age, perhaps?
Possibly age 12, maybe.
Okay.
You have to start. I mean, you're going to school, so you got to do your own homework, and so you develop responsibility as you get.
Without knowing it, you gave a very good answer to my question. You gave an answer that I was looking for, actually. You'll figure out why.
As you get older.
No, the age specifically.
Oh, age 12. That's before you become a teenager.
That's good. Okay, awesome. Anyone else want to share?
That sort of follows with this one in a different way, though. In the spirit of the context here, I would have to say my bar mitzvah. Because, and it was, and what's interesting about it for me is that I'm thinking now, you know, what was the first, I mean, I skated. I had to make choices when I was skating that came well before that. But this was something that was birthright. So that's where it came from.
Right.
I knew it was going to happen whether I wanted to or not. Mitzvah, college, there were things that I knew. And my community trusted me. Everyone who came before me trusted me to do this and to continue a tradition, which has stayed with me forever, even though I've lived in some places where I've been bombarded about being Jewish. And it's something that's was not forced on me, but it's always been a part of me. And it shows up in funny ways, but never knocking me on the head. It's just, it is. And that's the solid part of it.
Amazing. And you took that on?
I took it on, and I think a lot of it was because I was always kind of attacked for it, which made it even stronger. You know, don't tell me no. This is what I feel. This is where it comes from, and it's not maybe traditional. It's maybe more cultural, but it's there all the time. And never, you can't turn it on or off. It's who I am, and
Jewishness kind of sticks. It's part of your. It's not separate. It's often people will say that rather than I'm me and then I'm Jewish, it's just I'm Jewish at the core. Once you get it there, that's the lens through which you see life.
that's a good way to see it. Yeah.
You may not like that lens, but that lens exists regardless.
And it comes with everything that's come before, so it's a little tinted, but then you find the place.
Everybody finds their place. Well, it's my job to help people find their place. So, it's good. Does anyone else want to share?
Okay, I think first time that playing the cello in front of the PTA, and I got the cello because Bobby Kerr, one of our dad's friends, got polio, and I got stuck with his cello because he couldn't play. He was totally paralyzed.
Wow.
I wanted to play the harp, but okay, so I got stuck
Was
with
this
the cello.
back in school?
Yeah, we would have been probably grade school. And our parents wanted us to play instruments. I don't know why, okay? And how we got stuck with doing it in front of the PTA, I will never know. It was a nightmare. I was playing with a pianist, and I kept slowing down, and she didn't know what to do. I mean, I was terrified, you know?
Yeah.
But now, we didn't do anything afterwards that I remember, but it's always been something that my sisters and I share because they played a duet on violins that night. So all of us had the terror and the, you know, wait behind the stage for it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The butterflies.
Yeah, and it's still, like, that's still part of
Right.
our story.
But you did it.
But I did it, and you know, I had to practice. I had to be willing to go out there and do it that night. I mean, I couldn't back out. I was responsible.
And somebody gave you that task of playing for them, knowing that, or trusting that you would meet that.
Trusting my father would kill me if I didn't.
We have different reinforcements in society to make sure that people do the right thing. So, wonderful. So, unless both of you really want to share, I'll move into what I was getting at. So,
Oh, can I just also add that
absolutely.
that the interesting thing about public about bar mitzvah is that it is in fact bar mitzvah. It's a public acknowledgement. It's you know, like a marriage or anything else. It's not even about what you feel. It's about acknowledging that you were now accepted as an adult in your community. So it was something where here is this moment where, you know, you have to sort of be present.
You really did.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah, and
you
then
know
you know
what-
that it's forever.
Did you know what the topic of conversation was today?
No, I just came in to say hello.
Okay, because, well, wonderful. We are talking about bar and bat mitzvah today. So it's perfect. So, and why you said that is relevant is because of the age where that happens. Bar bat mitzvah happens at 13, sometimes 12 for women, but it happens right around that time. So, what is a bar bat mitzvah? Do we know what a mitzvah is?
good deed.
But good try. A good deed is part of it. A good deed is part of it. A piece of it. Pardon me?
It's a very big part of it.
Not all of them are good deeds, unless you consider a good deed connecting you with God, connecting you with something holy to people. Usually we think of charity as good deeds, and good things for others. So good deeds are part of it, but it's stronger than that. A mitzvah is what you are commanded to do. It's a commandment that we find from the Torah, from the rabbis. I thought it was a good deed for a very, very long time, too. No, not at all. It's just larger than that and stronger than that. Because a good deed, you don't have to do it.
Right.
Commandment, you're supposed to do it. Bar is Aramaic for son. Bat is Hebrew for daughter. Aramaic, back in very early times, like time of Jesus, really, around the year 0, that was the English. That was the general language spoken in those times. Hebrew wasn't that. And so when this developed, the bar mitzvah was really the term that developed, son of the commandment. And because we were in a very patriarchal culture, the ceremony for women, which we'll talk about later, doesn't happen until later. So you don't have the Aramaic word for daughter, which I don't know what it is. So you have the Hebrew word. Pardon me?
Call Mel Gibson.
I won't trust him with a thing. So literally, a son or a daughter of the commandments? Literally, you become bar bat mitzvah. People will often say I was bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. That's slang because it's a noun. It's not a verb or an adjective, really. So the bar mitzvah is literally the age of when you are suddenly required to fulfill the commandments. So when you are now tried as an adult, Jewishly, you are now counted as an adult. Traditionally, for boys, this meant wearing tefillin, which are the leather straps that both men and women, but fewer women, will wear, which involves a little leather box on the forehead and a leather box on the arm. It comes from the prayer we say after the Shema, which talks about putting the message between your eyes and by your hand. And a lot of Reform Jews you won't see doing it, partly because I think some people thought it was archaic, but also because you don't do it on the Sabbath. And Reform Jews and you don't do it on holidays, and Reform Jews tend to pray most often on the Sabbath and holidays. So if you don't do that, you don't really encounter it. I like doing it because it's a very physical kind of prayer, but you're required to do that more often now. The talit, the prayer shawl, will be introduced at the bar mitzvah. And that's actually a recent phenomenon, because it used to be, first of all, that only men would wear the talit, but that would only be introduced after somebody was married. But we started introducing that at the bar bat mitzvah, and so that's one of the first visible mitzvot that a person takes on. As well, the thing that you start to do is you can have the honor of blessing during the reading of the Torah. And so the other thing that you pretty much see across the board for all bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs in liberal circles, liberal religious, not liberal politically, is that they'll go up for a blessing of the Torah. And literally, it happens differently, but literally it doesn't matter if you have a ceremony or not. When you turn 13, you are age of majority. You can count. That's from a technical perspective. In the same way that technically, it doesn't matter how you're raised. You could be in a Buddhist monastery. If your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. That's technically speaking, but that does not mean it does not mean that in your mind, in your seichel, your mind that you are. So the question is, do you really count the significance, and do you mark that significance? And then to tie it in before, this is really the big moment where you are now responsible as a Jewish adult. And so it's a time where you figure out you're responsible for yourself. And where other people acknowledge that. 12, that's the time that you really heavily begin the process of preparing. So, the significance, so you reach the Jewish age of majority, which is a huge privilege. But it's also a huge responsibility in the same way that age of majority here for voting when you get to vote, it's fantastic. You get to have a say, but it's a huge responsibility because people are counting on you to learn, to be educated, and to exercise your vote responsibly and to participate in the future of our countries. It's huge. And so likewise, being part of the Jewish age of majority, there's a concept in Judaism called the minyan. And I asked a number of our children who were going to become bar mitzvah if they knew what a minyan was, and they said, "Was it one of those little yellow guys from the movie who support you in your evil deeds?" No. Think numbers. Is it when you have a bunch of people that are supporting you in your evil deeds? No. Is it just having people support you? No. Well, sort of. A minyan is it's accounting. It's that there's certain rituals that require a quorum of 10 Jewish adults. In Orthodox circles, it'll be Jewish males. But it requires 10 people because they're prayers that have an extra level of holiness and that require community. Sometimes the language will actually include language of community. Some of the prayers for morning actually require a quorum of 10, like the Kaddish. Which means that you really need to bring a group together for the prayer, but it also helps to support the mourner. But in order to be counted for these kinds of rituals, in order for somebody to say Amen to somebody else's prayer means me too, essentially. But in order to have that ritual count, in order to say Amen, you cannot say Amen to a 5-year-old's prayer and have it count if you're really looking for the mitzvah points. Mitzvah points is not a technical term. Because in order for it to count for you, the person who says the prayer has to also be responsible. They have to mean it. So if it, for example, saying the prayer over Torah, people say Amen to that because everyone wants to bless the Torah. But you don't actually get to bless the Torah unless the person who's blessing it actually can bless it and actually has to bless it. You need to be in with everything that you have for somebody else to be able to count on you. And so that's what it means when you are age of majority, that it's a huge privilege, and this is what I told Alex, their son, before his bar mitzvah, that he could now be counted upon. And so when you're son of commandment, or daughter of commandment, it's huge for you, but it's also huge for your community. And it shows, it's that ritual that marks, I am going to be responsible for my Jewish life. I'm going to be responsible for my own life. And other people, because I'm taking this on, and I've demonstrated it, and I'm going to explain how you demonstrate it. And this is the de facto bar mitzvah rather than the technical bar mitzvah. Once you've demonstrated, people really see that they can rely on you. It also works as it's the conclusion of your childhood, in a sense. It's moving to your teenage years. Thank you. Do you have to run?
Yes, I have to run.
Okay, well, John, thanks for coming. Good to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Take care.
I know more Jewish people.
You're welcome back
We're here every
anytime.
Monday.
Yeah, every Monday, come on back.
Exactly. So, okay, so that's significance. Did I miss anything? It also, to prepare for the ceremony, it takes a tremendous amount of learning. And while sometimes you see that, there's a joke. I can't have a class without a joke, right? Where the synagogue had a problem with rats. And no matter what they did, they couldn't get rid of the rats. And so somebody had an idea. Just give them all bar mitzvahs, then they'll be out the door soon. There's a joke that kids leave the synagogue. The parents don't make them go to Hebrew school after their bar mitzvah, which happens sometimes because people think that, oh, they do bar mitzvah, that's what I want, and then they can go off and do their own thing. We don't like that because the idea is that you become an adult in the Jewish community so you can be part of the Jewish community and contribute later on. And so ideally it's the first major commitment of a child to their Jewish life. So when you're talking about life cycle events and grade graduations, this is the big one.
But also, after bar mitzvah is what they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it is a choice.
It depends on where you live. Because
That's
at my house, choice is out there.
right.
In house, yeah,
But
Our
seriously,
oldest
they
one
do
is
make that choice.
According to ritual law, it's what you have to do. Because up until bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, it's the parent who is responsible. And after that, Jewishly, you become responsible for yourself. parent might still get a say because otherwise there are great consequences. But you're not obligated to enforce that
If you wish to
afterwards.
eat at my
Yeah.
something like that.
So the first time you actually see this concept is that in Pirkei Avot, which we studied in Lunch and Learn, and it's a very early text, probably sometime around the year 200, it says that at the age of 13, he's ready for mitzvot. He's ready for the commandments. So you see that notion of that age, and then later on in the Talmud, which is a few hundred years later, you actually find the first reference to the bar mitzvah, which refers to an adult Jewish male who is obligated, required to perform biblical law. So then by the 14th century, it's only at the 14th century that we actually see one tied to the other. The 14th century, this bar mitzvah, it happens at 13. And one of the things that you'll note, which even Obama, when he spoke to all of the Reformed Jews, or a lot of us at the convention in D.C., I believe that was last year, commented, you hear about the lavish parties that are not the major part of the bar mitzvah, but people like to make great parties. Question, how long have people been throwing lavish parties that may take away or theoretically take away from some of the meaning of the actual ceremony? Well, the rabbis were condemning these lavish parties by the 16th century. Which means that
last.
I don't know that they could get the same DJ and dancers for the 16th century, but
Photo booth.
maybe they had a sketch artist with the charcoal from the fire. But there was enough that the rabbi said there's something opulent going on, and you're missing the point.
Who decided that
We
they
just
should
had a
connect
photo booth.
bar mitzvah should be
And broke
at
some
the-
I'm
sort
not
of
sure.
record for how many pictures.
Some rabbis.
I'll email you that.
I think it makes sense that if the Mishnah says, well, this person is no, I don't think we have that
It
information.
wasn't the great
Yeah.
Saint Edwin.
No, it was
that
probably
decided
it probably is a tradition that developed over time, and this was the earliest point that we saw something written down. I probably won't be able to get you much more information than that.
Okay,
You had said all of
That's
that
so-
2 months ago.
Pardon me?
I wish you had said all of that 2 months ago.
It's a beautiful part.
just kind of
We
happened.
set some sort of record for the photo booth. Because they actually ran out of ink in the printer.
Oh my
So they had to send their pictures to us. We got them today.
Wow.
Because he was like, I'm sorry. We didn't think it was going to be this popular.
That's fantastic.
So,
You also had the best swag of any bar mitzvah I've been to. They had light up tambourines. But
I still have mine.
right.
Yes, I do.
Amazing. Okay, so just to get back to this, and so what we first see in the ceremony, because it makes sense that, well, if at 13 now they're ready for mitzvot, and the bar mitzvah is somebody that's ready for mitzvot, then you know, A equals B equals C, then A equals C. Therefore 13 is bar mitzvah. I think that formula matched up somewhere along the line. So what did it first include? Traditionally on Shabbat you'll have 7 aliyot, 7 sections of Torah that you're reading, and then following, we cut it down a little bit in Reform Judaism.
could have used all 7.
Yeah.
Could have used all 7.
There's a section called the Maftir after, which is usually the last part read twice, or if it's a holiday or special day, it's a different reading from a different section to mark the day, but it's a non-required portion. So originally they would say the blessing and then sometimes read the Maftir, because just in case they were wrong about the date, the birthday, because calendars weren't so reliable, they were doing it from the section that wasn't as important, so they wouldn't be violating anything. Which is why that in traditional circles, at the least, the bar mitzvah will read the Maftir. And then it evolved into more Torah reading, more activity, but sometimes less. Really, you just require the blessing. My father, who grew up in the former Soviet Union, his bar mitzvah was the day before his wedding, when the rabbi figured out, wait a second, you didn't have a bar mitzvah? Okay, come to services, you'll stand up here and read the aliyah after me, because it was very important to him that my father had bar mitzvah before. So it was just kind of having that honor that comes. So really, it was the observance of you're of the age of majority.
Probably don't mention that to the kids.
No, I'm not going to. And then, so that's bar mitzvah. Bat mitzvah happens much later. It happens in 1922. The first one is Judith Kaplan, who, good Jewish connection. Her father was Mordecai Kaplan, who started the denomination known as Reconstructionism, which is a lesser-known denomination of Judaism, but a significant one. Mainstream Orthodoxy typically still does not do the bat mitzvah. Sometimes there'll be a celebration to mark it, and sometimes it could be that the girl will give a Dvar Torah, some words teaching Torah at a dinner, and have a celebration. Occasionally, in a couple of circles, there'll be a separate women's service where the girl will do much more. Conservative, most of the time the girl will have the bat mitzvah. Reform, the girl will have the bat mitzvah just as much as the boy will. Well, the boy will have the bar mitzvah, the boy will not have the bat mitzvah. And in ultra-Orthodox circles, some rabbis are vehemently against it, and most are, yeah, I wouldn't do that, but not vehement. And then, you occasionally get the Orthodox black sheep who says it's not such a bad thing. Good
Well,
for you.
that's why I didn't have a bar mitzvah. That's why I put on here the first significant thing for me was setting up a kosher home, a Jewish home. But because I didn't have that experience, until I was an adult, and then I had several.
You can always have more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what does it take to prepare for bar mitzvah? Loads of studying. Because in order, you have years of preparation. Most synagogues, including our own, will require at least 3 years in the religious school to be part of the community. It ensures that you know Hebrew, because you need to know Hebrew. You need to learn the prayers. You often need to learn much more than you're actually going to do, because the goal is that you can participate in services. So it requires a lot of studying. It requires, some synagogues will require showing up at services as well for those kids who don't regularly. And what I think is great that we didn't do in my time, we do in a lot of Reform congregations, and I can't speak for anyone else because I don't know, is we have something called the Mitzvah Project, which actually requires the kid to be doing something beyond the walls of the synagogue and making a difference in the world, doing the good deed part of mitzvah. And that is Alex's Mitzvah Project.
He raised toys. He collected toys for Sandy.
Oh,
Affected
nice.
kids. And that was him the week after his bar mitzvah on his actual birthday, delivering toys.
Oh,
And that's the community group he built with the
It's
kids.
amazing.
well, that's really neat.
So it
He
really,
actually,
it gets
all
the
by
idea of
himself,
acting.
decided
Here in
he wants to do it every year.
actually collected books for City Keeper
Oh, nice.
and Keeper Billion.
We've had some really cool projects come out of it. And
Yeah.
Alex on his own decided he wanted to do this again next year.
Oh, nice.
So you see a lot of creativity, and you see a lot of taking responsibility for other people. So these are all things you have to do to prepare. And so the bar mitzvah, what we like to think of it, is that de facto what it is the preparation that goes into it. Because you become bar mitzvah without the ceremony. But it's doing the work, and it's the process of taking responsibility that really brings you there. And then the bar mitzvah, and that sense of other people trusting you. For that's showing everybody else that you can do it. But you've already done it. So that's a preparation. Services will often take place at a synagogue. For those who are members, some people, I have cousins, for example, who are part of a group of Jews, chavara, is the Hebrew term, but a group of Jews who pray together, but they're not part of the synagogue, so they have the service at a hotel. Occasionally, some Jews will do the service at the Western Wall, the holiest place that we think of in
Or
Judaism.
Masada.
Exactly, or on Masada, which is a very significant place, which is look it up if you don't know the story of Masada, because it's a long story, very fascinating. A little controversial, actually. And some people will go to other places in Israel, but because Israel is such an important place for the Jewish people, a lot of people will have these sacred ceremonies there. You particularly see that among a lot of Israelis who don't really participate in synagogue life, but their Judaism is very important for them, and this is a very important ritual for everyone, including some of my cousins. They did that.
That's what I was saying before. That it's not like the announcement and here's your plaque. It's like it's who you are. So the fact that it's around you all the time there is different than my growing up here, where anti-Semitism was around me all the time. So it changes your outlook and your approach to who you are.
Your environment in general, not only in Israel. We didn't join a synagogue until I was 7 years old because I grew up in Montreal where there were so many Jews everywhere that Jewish life surrounded you in the same way. And then we moved to Mississauga where there was one small synagogue in a big waspy now Arab town, where you suddenly needed to find that community for yourself. And so there are different ways of embracing this ritual depending on the kind of community in which you take part. So timing, most B'nai Mitzvah, and B'nai Mitzvah is the plural of Bar Bat Mitzvah, most B'nai Mitzvah will take place on Shabbat morning, on Saturday mornings. Sometimes you'll have a mincha service. You see those a lot more at enormous synagogues that have tons of kids that need to fit in services everywhere. Not even tons. The 600 family congregation that I was at did some of those. Mincha is the afternoon service. Right. Really, you can do Bar Bat Mitzvah at any service where Torah is read. Torah is read on Shabbat, and then it's also read on Monday mornings and Thursday mornings. Why? Because those were market day, when people would gather and go to the market, so they would read Torah there. So very practical. When people would gather, they'd read Torah. We also read Torah at Rosh Chodesh on the new moon. So it's appropriate to do a bar bat mitzvah at that time. Typically, don't.
The wall on Monday.
Pardon me?
I was at the wall on Monday, and it was like,
Exactly.
oh my goodness, it was like one right after the other,
Oh, yeah.
after the other. Amazing.
And in a lot of Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox communities, they'll more often do the bar mitzvah on the weekday because people can travel on the weekday. They can't travel on Shabbat, so it makes it a lot easier for people to come in. So that's time. Nowadays, when the bar mitzvah leads a service, the minimum is they'll read a little bit of Torah, sometimes Haftarah, which is a prophetic section after. It could be that they read the entire Torah reading for that day. It could be that they read part of the Torah reading for that day. It depends on the community where you go. They'll definitely do some of the blessings before and after the portion. Sometimes the bar bat mitzvah will, and bar bat mitzvah is the term for the child, now adults, Jewishly, not actually. Working on adult, teenager, young adult. They'll also lead a number of the prayers in the service to different degrees depending on where you go, and usually they will give a Devar Torah, which means words of Torah, that they not only read the words by rote in Hebrew, often they'll chant them as well, but they will interpret the words and become teachers to everyone else in the community, which is another responsibility that we have. Not only to take in the words of Torah, our sacred words, but to transmit them. So that happens at the service. Something that you'll often see is that the child will then get pummeled by candy or nuts or sweets. Some congregations don't do it, including my own, but my own where I grew up. But ours does. We do, and it's a lot of fun. And the idea is that it was a very sweet moment. And so we shower the kid with candies, and then it often turns into kids showing off
I see the
showing
rabbi
off
and
their
the kids
arms.
are slowly moving back just before it.
I usually protect myself with my talit, my prayer shawl.
There they go.
Something else that you'll often see, there's the traditional prayer, which is where we get to what you were saying. The traditional prayer comes from the ancient Midrash, Baruch Shepatrani, Me'on Shel, or Me'on Shel Sheli, or something like that. It means, and it's from Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Shimon, and he says, a man is responsible for educating his son until the age of 13, and thereafter he must say, blessed is he who has freed me from this responsibility. Onesh can also be this punishment. So that's said in Orthodox circles and some conservative, some conservative and Reform said we kind of don't like that idea. So instead we say the prayer, the Shehechianu, which thanks God for bringing us to this sacred moment.
You can say it for Nicholas when he goes
Yeah.
off to college.
But there's some Reform circles where they brought back that Baruch Shepatrani, not because it's a burden to raise the child, but because it's a very sacred moment, and blessed are you who now relieves me of the responsibility and now passes the responsibility to this child, that it is now in their hands to do the right thing, whatever that may be, which is very scary for everyone. And often the blessings and celebrations are to help us. I mean, if we really think of the full responsibility that you get with Bar Bat Mitzvah, it's kind of terrifying. You're being an adult, you're responsible. And so, in the same way, Baruch Shepatrani can be a very bittersweet moment for parents. You're watching your little girl or little boy grow up.
Doesn't happen that quickly.
No. But it happens very quickly at that moment. The moment you say, where did the years go? And then you look in the mirror, you say, oh, there's the gray hair, there's the gray hair from that year. So there's that one. Let's going through to make sure I don't forget anything. Okay, so you have the service. Then you have the festivities after, which the criticism is that sometimes people get so caught up in the festivities, and this is more often towards parents than kids. Like, what will the neighbors think? What will the Johnsons think who come to or the Steins think who come to the party? And there's nothing wrong with planning a great festival. It's just important that we keep in mind what the festival is honoring and make sure not to go too overboard with it to eclipse the festival.
So you mean the cash machines, the money things that's overboard?
Probably.
What bothers me the most is when people go to the party and don't come to the service. That
The kids actually came. A lot of his friends, even the ones that aren't Jewish, were at the service. And we were very surprised.
I think that's wonderful.
Well, you start to see that in some cases of, it's a Jewish equivalent of the Sweet 16. It's a celebration. The kids are going to be bored in the service, and we don't want the kids there. But it really is that the service is a sacred moment. And so if you're going to go to one, better that you go to the service. So often there'll be big parties with a DJ, sometimes with a band, with a meal. Are you all familiar with the term the shmorg? Yeah, the smorgasbord beforehand. I see that more at weddings than bar bat mitzvahs, but it happens. I would call what you had at yours a shmorg, and it was quite good. I'm not using yours as the example
We went to one where there was not only a cash machine, but we went to one that had live animals.
Wait, there was
One that had the
actually a
Noah's
cash
Ark.
machine?
Yeah, the kids got to sit in the cash machine and grab as much money as they could in 30 seconds. We went to one that was a Noah's Ark theme where they had live animals. And the
I would not
cash
want my child coming home from a bar mitzvah with live animals.
Well,
I would want my kids.
no,
I wouldn't
not
even
those
do a
kind.
bar
This one
mitzvah.
had like camels and sheep, because it was a Noah's Ark theme.
No, that's a native.
Well, see, I could say you could say that could be education with Noah's Ark, but it may be over. So you may expect that. There'll definitely be a hora, which is the dancing in circles, which everybody does, and you put the child, sometimes the siblings, sometimes the parents, up on a chair and raise them. I fell off my chair at my bar mitzvah, and then held on for dear life at my wedding. I did not fall at my
I
wedding.
was not prepared, so I didn't do it.
But so you have those celebrations. Sometimes you'll have the luncheon, and sometimes there's a celebration after the lunch instead during the afternoon. That was what mine was. I was always jealous of the kids that got the night party. But
There's a reason. My oldest Nicholas had the luncheon because his grandparents were 90. They weren't staying up.
exactly. So there are different reasons. So that's what to expect with.
We had a big
with the
kiddish, and then
party.
we said, "Okay, let's go eat now." What?
About the food.
So, and then in terms of gifts, people often ask what are good gifts. So often people will give cash in multiples of 18. You're thinking, do you have examples of what not to give as gifts?
$1.98.
Yeah,
Not
we got
appropriate.
a couple. No, I think it wasn't like that.
My father got a snake.
Yes, that's
Ow.
probably a big gift.
Why did
Maybe
it
it wasn't.
snake?
Now it's your responsibility not to listen to
okay.
this snake. But yeah, multiples of 18 because 18 is symbolically significant. It means live. The word chai, the numerical value, is 18, and chai means live. So that often happens. People will often give donations to tzedakah, to charity, or donations to other organizations. Sometimes people buy a tree in Israel to honor you. Sometimes people give books. So those are things to give. Sometimes people give other things too.
Video games.
Video game, absolutely. Sometimes people set up a trust fund for you for college.
That's nice.
And so that is the bar and bat mitzvah, and we are right on time. Thank you. I was hoping there'd be time for questions, but what I have for you, so you can forge your very own, although you might have to erase the R and put in a T, I brought you all copies of our bar bat mitzvah certificate, which is a fancy piece of paper that you get on your bar bat mitzvah that gets filled out. That is a record to show that you have had that important ceremony. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And at this point, you can cut the camera for whenever you're editing. Marcy, it was very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hope
I don't
you'll
know how
join
to-
us again.
How do we do this? Cool.
Hey, Serge. We're all finished for today. I had to finish a bit early.
We are